Saren Caldwell did not know the Duke of Thornmere was watching her. She tilted her head toward the rain-lashed carriage window, using the dark glass as a mirror, and tucked a loose strand of copper hair behind her ear. The motion was thoughtless, practical, born of 3 hours trapped in a vehicle with a man who had spoken exactly 9 words to her since they departed his sister's estate. 9 words. She had counted. Inside the carriage, Alaric Vane forgot how to breathe. He had trained himself over 7 years to look through Saren Caldwell as though she were made of smoke. He had perfected the art of acknowledging her existence with the bare minimum of courtesy required by his friendship with her brother Hadrian. He had convinced himself, through sheer force of will, that the way his chest tightened whenever she entered a room was nothing more than irritation. But watching her now, the pale curve of her throat exposed as she turned, her fingers delicate against the fiery chaos of her hair, he felt something far more dangerous than irritation. He felt hunger. He looked away immediately. The rain had been falling for 6 hours. What had started as a gentle autumn mist somewhere past the village of Ashford had transformed into a relentless downpour that drummed against the carriage roof like a declaration of war. The roads had turned to rivers of mud. Twice already the coachman had stopped to assess whether they could continue. The answer, Alaric suspected, would soon be no. "You might as well say it," Saren said, breaking the suffocating silence. He did not look at her. "Say what, Miss Caldwell?" "Whatever bitter thought is making your jaw clench like that, I can practically hear your teeth grinding." "My jaw is perfectly relaxed. And I'm the Queen of England." She shifted on the leather seat, her rain-dampened traveling dress rustling. "You have been silently resenting my presence since we left Odessa's engagement celebration. If you intend to be unpleasant for the remaining 4 hours of this journey, I would prefer you simply be unpleasant aloud so I can argue back. The silence is tedious." Alaric finally turned to face her. Those eyes, green as spring ivy after rain, met his with the same defiance they had carried since she was 19 years old, and he had made the catastrophic mistake of telling her that her laugh was too loud for polite company. She had never forgiven him for it. He had never forgiven himself either, though she would never know that. "I am not resentful," he said flatly. "I am practical. Your carriage broke an axle. Your brother asked me to deliver you safely home. I agreed, because Hadrian is my closest friend, and refusing would have been churlish. How generous of you." "I am not generous. I am obligated." The word landed between them like a slap. Serene's expression flickered, something wounded darting across her features before she smoothed it away. She turned back to the window, presenting him with the stiff line of her shoulder. "Of course," she said quietly. "An obligation. How foolish of me to imagine anything else." Alaric opened his mouth to respond, to say something that might undo the damage, but the carriage lurched violently sideways. Saren gasped, thrown from her seat. He lunged forward without thinking, catching her before she slammed into the door, his arms wrapping around her waist, her body pressing against his chest. For one endless moment, neither of them moved. She was warm. So warm, and she smelled of rosewater and rain and something else, something that was simply her, and his mind went terrifyingly blank. "Are you hurt?" His voice came out rough, scraped raw. She stared up at him, her breath shallow, her lips parted. They were close enough that he could count the faint freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. Close enough that if he lowered his head just slightly, he could taste her. The thought hit him like a fist to the stomach. He released her immediately, practically shoving her back onto her seat. "I'm fine," she said, voice unsteady. "What happened?" Outside, the coachman shouted something indistinguishable over the roar of rain. The carriage had stopped at an unnatural angle. Alaric pushed open the door, letting in a blast of cold, wet air, and leaned out. "The road ahead, Your Grace," The coachman called down, water streaming from his hat. "It is completely flooded. The river has overrun its banks. We cannot pass." "How far to the nearest village?" "There is an inn perhaps a mile back, Your Grace." "The Gilded Fern. Small establishment, but it will have to do." Alaric's stomach sank. An inn, 1 mile back, with Seren Caldwell, unchaperoned, in a rainstorm that showed no signs of stopping. Hadrian would murder him. "Turn the carriage around," he said. "We will wait out the storm." He pulled the door shut and found Seren watching him with an expression he could not read. Her hair had come loose from the encounter, copper strands curling wildly around her face. She looked disheveled, vulnerable, and utterly beautiful. He hardened his jaw against the observation. "We are stopping," he said shortly. "I gathered that." She paused. "Alaric, what about my reputation?" It was the first time she had used his Christian name since they were children. The sound of it on her lips did something destructive to his composure. "We will manage," he said, though he had no idea how. "We will be careful." "Careful." She laughed, brittle as autumn leaves. "I have spent 7 years watching you be careful around me. Careful not to look at me too long. Careful not to stand too close. Careful not to acknowledge that I exist unless absolutely necessary. Miss Caldwell, do not," her voice sharpened, "do not retreat into formality now. We are about to be stranded together at an inn in a rainstorm, and the entire county will gossip for months. The least you can do is tell me why you despise me so thoroughly." Alaric met her gaze, and for one dangerous moment, he nearly told her the truth. That he did not despise her at all. That despising her would have been infinitely easier than what he actually felt. That he had spent 7 years building walls specifically to keep Seren Caldwell out, and those walls were crumbling faster than he could repair them. Instead, he said, "I do not despise you. I am simply not interested in you. There is a difference." The lie tasted like poison on his tongue. He watched her face change, watched the light in those green eyes flicker and die, and felt something in his chest crack open. He had done that. He had put that expression on her face, and he would have to live with the memory of it for the rest of his miserable life. Her expression went cold, closed, and distant. The warmth that had been there moments ago, that spark of fire he had always secretly adored, vanished behind walls of ice. She drew herself up, spine straight, chin lifted, every inch the dignified lady even in her rain-spotted dress. "How clarifying," she said softly. "Thank you for your honesty." The words were perfectly polite, perfectly composed, and they cut him deeper than any blade. She turned to the window, shutting him out completely. Her reflection in the glass was pale, ghost-like, and he could see the rapid rise and fall of her shoulders as she fought to control her breathing. The carriage began its slow, treacherous turn on the muddy road, and Alaric Vane, Duke of Thornmere, ruthless negotiator, feared by rivals and respected by allies, sat in the suffocating silence and wondered how a single lie could feel more damning than any truth he had ever spoken. The Gilded Fern was chaos. Travelers packed the small common room, all of them driven from the roads by the same relentless storm. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool, wood smoke, and roasting meat. Voices overlapped in a din of complaint and resignation. Every face looked exhausted, stranded, and desperate for shelter. Serene stood just inside the doorway, painfully aware of how bedraggled she must appear. Her traveling dress was spotted with rain. Her hair had abandoned any pretense of propriety. And beside her, Alaric Vane looked precisely as he always did. Composed, commanding, utterly untouchable. She hated him for it. No, that was not quite accurate. She hated herself for noticing. The innkeeper, a stout man with a harried expression and ink-stained fingers, barely glanced up from his ledger as they approached. Need a room? I have nothing left. Storm caught everyone. You are the third party in the last hour. Surely you have something, Alaric said. His voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Anything will suffice. The innkeeper looked up then, taking in Alaric's expensive greatcoat, his polished boots, the unmistakable bearing of aristocracy. His expression shifted slightly. There is one room remaining, sir. Small. Single bed. 15 shillings for the night. One room. One bed. Seren's heart stopped. We will take it, Alaric said without hesitation, already reaching for his coin purse. She grabbed his arm, fingers digging into the fine wool of his sleeve. A word, she hissed. In private. He glanced down at her hand, then at her face, then back at the innkeeper. One moment. She pulled him toward a corner near the staircase, away from the curious eyes of stranded travelers. Her pulse hammered against her throat. Are you mad? She whispered fiercely. One room. One bed. If anyone discovers who we are, if anyone realizes that the Duke of Thornmere shared accommodations with an unmarried woman, I will be ruined. Completely and utterly ruined. Would you prefer to sleep in the stables? His voice was low, controlled. Because that is the alternative. The common room is full. Every other inn within 10 miles is likely the same. The storm is not breaking tonight. Then we find separate arrangements. You take the room. I will manage somehow. You will manage somehow. He repeated her words flatly. Alone, unchaperoned, in an inn full of strangers, many of whom have already noticed you. I counted 4 men staring at you when we entered. Do you imagine they will politely ignore an unattached woman wandering the hallways at midnight? Heat flooded her cheeks. I can take care of myself. I have no doubt you believe that. His gray eyes were hard, flinty. But I am not willing to explain to your brother how I let his sister be accosted at an inn because I was too delicate to share a room with her. So, this is about Hadrian. This is about basic safety. And my reputation means nothing. Something flickered across his features, there and gone, before she could name it. Your reputation, he said quietly, will be protected. We will simply need to be creative. Before she could respond, he turned and strode back to the innkeeper, leaving her standing alone with her heart pounding and her thoughts spiraling. She watched him lean close to the innkeeper, speaking in low tones. The innkeeper's eyebrows rose. Then he nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Alaric returned, his expression unreadable. What did you tell him? Seren demanded. I told him you are my wife. The world tilted. Your what? My wife. He said it calmly, as though he were commenting on the weather. Mrs. Vane, we have been married 6 months. We are traveling to visit your family in the country. The storm delayed us. You cannot be serious. I'm always serious. He took her hand, and the contact sent electricity crackling up her arm. As far as anyone in this inn is concerned, we are a respectable married couple seeking shelter from the rain. No scandal, no gossip, no ruination. She stared at him, breathless with fury and something else she refused to examine. And when someone recognizes you, when someone realizes you are the Duke of Thornmere, currently courting Lady Philippa Ashworth? A muscle jumped in his jaw. No one here will recognize me. I gave a false name, and Lady Philippa is not your concern. Not her concern. Of course she was not his concern. She had never been his concern. Fine, Seren said, the word brittle as old glass. We will play your little game. But if this deception collapses, I am blaming you entirely. Blame me all you like. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm, the gesture mockingly intimate. Now smile, darling. We are newlyweds. We should at least appear happy to be trapped together. She smiled with all her teeth. I would rather swallow needles. How romantic. His grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her hand. Try not to say that in front of witnesses. They climbed the stairs together, past curious eyes and knowing smirks. The innkeeper had given them a key attached to a worn ribbon, and Alaric unlocked the door to reveal their accommodations for the night. The room was tiny. A single bed dominated the space, barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. The mattress looked thin, the blankets threadbare, the pillows flat and uninviting. A washstand stood in the corner, its porcelain basin chipped and stained from years of use. A fireplace, cold and dark, occupied the opposite wall, its grate filled with ashes from some previous guest's fire. One small window showed nothing but rain and darkness, the glass so old and warped that the world beyond appeared distorted, dreamlike. The walls were bare, save for a single faded print of some hunting scene that had probably been hung before either of them was born. The floor creaked beneath their feet. The air smelled of dust and old smoke and something faintly damp. It was, without question, the worst accommodation Serene had ever seen. And she was going to be trapped here with Alaric Vane. Serene stood in the doorway, frozen. "You are sleeping on the floor," she said. "The floor is stone. It is also freezing." "Then you are sleeping in the hallway." And answering questions from every passing traveler about why I have been exiled from my own wedding bed. "No." She spun to face him, and he was closer than she expected, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The room suddenly felt even smaller. "Then what do you suggest?" she demanded. "I suggest we behave like adults." His voice dropped, velvet over steel. "We will share the bed. We will maintain appropriate distance. We will survive one night without killing each other. In the morning, the storm will break, and we will return to our separate lives as though none of this ever happened." Separate lives. There it was. The reminder she had not asked for, the truth she had always known. Alaric Vane wanted nothing to do with her. He was doing this for Hadrian, for duty, for the simple expedience of not creating a scandal. She was a problem to be managed, not a person to be wanted. "Fine," she said coldly. "One night, and then we never speak of this again." Agreed. She moved past him to the washstand, desperate to put distance between them. Her hands were shaking as she began removing her gloves, and she prayed he would not notice. Behind her, she heard him move to the fireplace, heard the scrape of kindling being arranged, the strike of a match. Slowly, reluctantly, warmth began to creep into the frozen room. "Serene," he said quietly. She stilled. He had used her name again, her Christian name. It sounded different when he said it. Dangerous. "What?" A pause, then, "Lock the door." She turned, confused. He was crouched by the fire, his back to her, the flames casting shadows across his profile. "Why?" "Because I do not trust anyone in this inn. Because the lock is flimsy. Because—" He stopped, jaw tight. "Because I want you safe." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with something unspoken. She locked the door, and tried very hard not to wonder why the ruthless Duke of Thornmere cared about her safety at all. Morning brought no relief. Serene woke to gray light filtering through rain-streaked glass and the distant rumble of thunder. The storm had not broken. If anything, it had worsened. She could hear the wind howling around the eaves like a living creature searching for entry. She was alone in the bed. That realization hit her with an odd mixture of relief and disappointment that she refused to examine too closely. At some point during the night, Alaric must have relocated. She vaguely remembered waking in the small hours, disoriented by darkness and unfamiliar sounds, and feeling the bed shift as he rose. He had taken the chair by the fireplace. She could see it now, pushed back slightly from its original position, a folded greatcoat draped over the arm as though used for warmth. He had given her the bed, the entire bed. Despite his protests about the cold floor, he had chosen discomfort over proximity to her. She did not know if she was grateful or insulted. The door opened without warning. Seren sat up sharply, clutching the thin blanket to her chest, her heart slamming against her ribs. But it was only Alaric, carrying a tray with what appeared to be bread, cheese, and a steaming pot of tea. "The common room is crowded," he said by way of greeting. "I thought you might prefer to eat here." He set the tray on the small table near the window, not looking at her. His hair was slightly damp, as though he had splashed water on his face. His cravat was loosened, his waistcoat unbuttoned. She had never seen him so disheveled. She had never seen him so human. "Thank you," she said carefully. "How long do they expect the storm to last?" "Another day at minimum, possibly 2. His jaw tightened. "The river has risen further overnight. The roads are impassable in every direction. 2 more days. 2 more days trapped in this room, pretending to be his wife, pretending that sharing a bed meant nothing, pretending that her entire reputation was not balanced on the edge of a knife." "I need air," she said abruptly. "The rain. I am aware of the rain." She pushed back the blankets and stood, reaching for her wrinkled traveling dress. "I will go to the common room, eat breakfast like a civilized person. Perhaps find someone to have a conversation with who does not treat every exchange as a verbal sparring match." Something flickered across his face. "Seren, do not." She held up a hand. "Do not seren me as though we are intimate. We are not intimate. We are 2 people trapped by circumstance, playing a fiction neither of us wanted. I am going downstairs, and you cannot stop me." "I was not attempting to stop you." His voice was carefully controlled. "I was going to say that you should remember our arrangement. If anyone asks, you are Mrs. Vane, my wife of 6 months. I remember. And perhaps," he paused, "perhaps you might attempt to appear as though you do not despise me quite so thoroughly. Newlyweds are generally affectionate with each other." "I will manage," she said icily, "to contain my obvious revulsion." She swept past him and out the door before he could respond. The common room was indeed crowded, but Seren found a small table near the fire and settled into a chair with her back to the stairs. She needed space. Space to think, to breathe, to stop feeling as though Alaric Vane's presence was slowly suffocating her. The serving girl brought tea, and Seren wrapped her hands around the warm cup gratefully. Outside, rain lashed the windows and sheets. Inside, stranded travelers talked in low voices, played cards, dozed in corners. It was almost peaceful. "Miss Caldwell." The voice came from behind her, warm and familiar and utterly unexpected. Serene turned, and her stomach dropped. Evander Hale stood before her, golden-haired and handsome as ever, dressed in traveling clothes that somehow remained immaculate despite the storm. His coat was perfectly pressed. His boots gleamed as though freshly polished. Even his cravat was tied with mathematical precision. He looked like a portrait come to life, too perfect to be real. His blue eyes widened with apparent delight, though something in them seemed calculated, rehearsed. She had not noticed that before. Had not noticed how his expression seemed to arrive a fraction of a second too late, as though he were choosing them from a menu rather than feeling them naturally. "It is you," he said, smiling broadly. "I thought I was imagining things when I saw you come down the stairs. What an extraordinary coincidence." Evander Hale, the man her father had been negotiating with for the past 3 months about a possible match. The man who had danced with her twice at Lady Whitmore's ball and sent her flowers the following morning. The man who was, by all accounts, everything a proper suitor should be. Wealthy, titled, charming, and interested. The man who absolutely could not discover she was sharing a room with the Duke of Thornmere. "Mr. Hale," she managed, forcing a smile. "What a surprise indeed. Are you also stranded by the storm?" "Unfortunately, yes." He gestured to the seat across from her. "May I join you? Unless you are expecting someone?" "I." She hesitated, mind racing. "Actually, I am here with the words stuck in her throat. "My husband." Evander's expression froze. "Your husband," he repeated slowly. "I was not aware you had married, Miss Caldwell. Or should I say, Mrs.? Mrs. Vane." The lie tasted like ash. It was quite recent. Only 6 months. 6 months. His smile returned, but it had sharpened somehow, the warmth bleeding out of it. "How extraordinary. Your father mentioned nothing of it when I spoke with him 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks ago. Her father had still been discussing a potential match with Evander Hale 3 weeks ago, which meant either her father had lied to Evander, or Evander knew she was lying now. "It was rather sudden," she said, keeping her voice steady. "A whirlwind courtship. You know how these things happen." "I confess I do not." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Particularly when the lady in question seemed quite open to other arrangements not so long ago. I distinctly remember you blushing when I suggested we take a turn in Lady Whitmore's garden." Heat flooded her cheeks. "That was before you met your husband." His gaze moved past her, toward the stairs, and his expression shifted into something calculating. "And who is this fortunate Mr. Vane? I should very much like to meet the man who swept you off your feet so thoroughly." As if summoned by the words, Alaric's voice came from directly behind her. "That would be me." Serene's heart stopped. Alaric stepped into view, positioning himself at her shoulder with the casual possessiveness of a man who had every right to be there. His hand came to rest on the back of her chair, fingers brushing her shoulder blade through the fabric of her dress. The touch burned. "Alaric Vane," he said smoothly, extending his other hand to Evander. "And you are?" Evander took the offered hand, but his eyes had narrowed. He was studying Alaric with the intensity of a man solving a puzzle. "Evander Hale. Miss Caldwell and I are." He paused deliberately. "Old acquaintances. How fortunate." Alaric's smile did not reach his eyes. "Though I believe you mean Mrs. Vane. My wife." The possessiveness in his voice sent something electric crackling down Serene's spine. Evander's gaze moved between them, assessing, suspicious, seeing far too much. "Of course," he said softly. "My apologies. Mrs. Vane." He smiled, and for the first time, Serene saw something cold behind the charm. "We must catch up properly. I am fascinated to hear how this whirlwind romance unfolded." And Serene realized, with a sinking certainty, that Evander Hale did not believe a single word they had said. The silence that followed Evander's words stretched like a held breath. Serene could feel Alaric's tension radiating through the fingers, still resting against her shoulder blade. To anyone watching, he appeared perfectly composed. But she had spent 7 years learning to read the small signs of his displeasure, the subtle tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible hardening of his jaw. He was furious. "I am certain my wife would be delighted to share the details of our courtship," Alaric said, his voice pleasant as poisoned honey. "However, we were just about to return to our room. The journey yesterday was exhausting, and she requires rest." Of course. Evander's smile remained fixed in place. "Though perhaps we might all dine together this evening. I find myself desperately bored, and familiar company would be most welcome." "We shall see," Alaric said. My wife's comfort takes precedence over social obligations. The emphasis on wife was deliberate, pointed, a claim staked in full view of the common room. Evander's eyes flickered with something sharp before his expression smoothed once more. Naturally. Until this evening, then. Mrs. Vane. He bowed slightly, his gaze lingering on Seren's face a moment too long. I look forward to continuing our conversation. He walked away, and Seren released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Alaric's hand closed around her elbow with barely restrained force. "Upstairs," he said quietly. "Now." She did not argue. They climbed the stairs in tense silence, Seren acutely aware of the warmth of his grip, the controlled fury in his movements. Only when they were safely inside their room with the door locked behind them did he release her. "Who is he?" Alaric demanded. "Evander Hale, I told you. You told me his name. I am asking who he is to you." His gray eyes were storm clouds, dark and churning. Because the way he looked at you suggested something considerably more than old acquaintance. "He is nobody to me." He did not look at you like nobody. "And what business is it of yours how he looks at me?" The words exploded out of her, 7 years of frustration finally finding voice. "You have made it abundantly clear that I am nothing more than an obligation, a burden to be managed. So why do you care if Evander Hale looks at me as though I am something worth having?" Alaric went very still. "Because he is dangerous," he said quietly. "Dangerous." She laughed, brittle as winter ice. "Evander Hale is charming, wealthy, and genuinely interested in me, unlike some people I could name." Genuine interest. Something dark moved through his expression. "Is that what you call it? The man was practically circling you like a wolf, scenting wounded prey. Perhaps I enjoy being wanted. Perhaps you deserve better than a man who wants you for your family's shipping connections." The words hit her like cold water. "What did you say?" Alaric turned away, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of barely controlled agitation. "Evander Hale's family has been hemorrhaging money for years. Bad investments, gambling debts, a father with expensive tastes, and no sense of consequence. Your father's shipping empire would solve a great many of his problems. You cannot know that. I know everything about the families who orbit our circles, Miss Caldwell. It is my responsibility to know." He spun back to face her. "Hale has been hunting for an heiress for the past 2 seasons. You are simply the latest prospect." "The latest prospect," her voice shook. "Is that supposed to make me feel better? That I am merely one of many targets? It is supposed to make you cautious. And what about you?" She stepped closer, reckless with anger and hurt. "What about Lady Philippa Ashworth? Is she not merely a prospect as well? A strategic alliance wrapped in silk and propriety?" His jaw tightened. "That is different." "How? How is it different? You are marrying for advantage just as Evander would be. The only distinction is that you are honest about your mercenary motivations. I am not." He stopped, something cracking in his composure. "Lady Philippa knows what our arrangement would be. There is no deception between us. How romantic. Romance is not the point." "Then what is the point, Alaric?" She was close to him now, close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat, the way his breathing had changed. "What is the point of any of it? Marrying someone you do not love? Building alliances that benefit everyone except the people trapped inside them? The point is duty." His voice was rough, scraped raw. "The point is family. The point is not destroying everything my father built because I was selfish enough to want something I cannot have." The words hung between them, heavy with implications she was afraid to examine. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "What do you want that you cannot have?" He stared at her, and for one moment, His careful mask slipped entirely. She saw exhaustion beneath. Longing, a hunger so vast it stole her breath. His gray eyes, usually so cold and controlled, burned with something that looked almost like pain, like desperation, like a man drowning and too proud to call for help. For the first time in 7 years, she saw past the Duke of Thornmere to the man beneath. And that man was not cold. He was not indifferent. He was breaking apart behind his carefully constructed walls, and she had never once noticed. Then his expression shuttered closed, the walls slamming back into place with almost audible force. "Nothing," he said flatly. "I want nothing. You are lying. Believe what you wish." He moved past her toward the window, putting distance between them like a physical barrier. "Stay away from Evander Hale, Seren. Whatever your history with him, whatever your father may have discussed with his family, it ends here. He is not what he appears to be." "And you are?" He did not answer. She watched his profile against the rain-streaked glass, the rigid line of his shoulders, the way his hands had clenched into fists at his sides. Something was breaking inside him. She could feel it. 7 years of walls developing fractures she had never noticed before. "Alaric," she said softly. "Please." His voice cracked on the word. "Please stop saying my name like that." "Like what?" "Like it means something to you." She had no response to that, no defense, because the terrible truth was that his name had always meant something to her, since she was 19 years old and hopelessly aware of the one man who would never look at her twice. "What if it does?" she whispered. He turned then, and his eyes were wild, desperate, nothing like the controlled Duke she had always known. "Then we are both in trouble," he said. "Because this cannot happen. Whatever you think you feel, whatever madness the storm has stirred up between us, it cannot go anywhere. I am promised to another. You are your brother's sister, and when this storm breaks, we will return to our separate lives and pretend none of this ever occurred." Separate lives. There it was again, the reminder that pierced like a blade. "Fine," she said coldly. "We will return to our separate lives. You will marry Lady Philippa. I will consider Evander Hale's suit, since apparently fortune hunters are all I can expect." "That is not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant." She grabbed her cloak from the chair. "I am going downstairs. I require distance from you." "Seren." But she was already gone, the door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty hallway. And Alaric stood alone in the small room, watching rain streak the window, and wondered when protecting her had become indistinguishable from destroying himself. Supper was a performance. Seren sat beside Alaric at a long table in the common room, surrounded by stranded travelers, making the best of their confinement. The fire crackled in the enormous stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across weathered faces and tired eyes. Candles flickered in brass holders, their light warm but insufficient, leaving corners of the room in darkness. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the air, but Seren could barely taste anything she ate. Evander had positioned himself directly across from them, his blue eyes tracking every interaction with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He smiled when he caught her looking, that charming smile that had once made her heart flutter. Now it made her stomach turn. Alaric played his role flawlessly. He served her food without being asked. He refilled her wine glass before it emptied. When she spoke, he listened with apparent fascination, his attention fixed on her face, as though no one else in the room existed. To anyone watching, they were exactly what they claimed to be, a devoted couple, still wrapped in the glow of new marriage. But his hand on hers felt like a brand. His smile never reached his eyes. "Tell me, Mr. Vane," Evander said during a lull in conversation, What is your profession? You have the bearing of a military man, yet I do not recognize your name from any regiment. I am in trade, Alaric said smoothly. Imports and exports, textiles primarily. How fascinating. Evander's tone suggested the opposite. And where did you meet your lovely wife? Through her brother. We have been friends for many years. Friends who became something more. Evander smiled. How convenient, though I confess myself surprised. When I last spoke with Mr. Caldwell, he gave no indication his sister was attached. Serene's pulse spiked. Hadrian can be protective, she said quickly. He preferred to keep the courtship private until we were certain of our feelings. And you were certain, after such a short acquaintance. I knew within the first month. Alaric's voice dropped, intimate, persuasive. His thumb traced slow circles on the back of her hand. Some connections require no lengthy deliberation. They simply are. Heat bloomed in her chest despite herself. Evander studied them with narrowed eyes. How romantic. Though I wonder that your families approved such haste. Marriage is a serious undertaking. One would expect more careful consideration. One would expect, Alaric agreed, if one had never experienced the kind of certainty that makes careful consideration irrelevant. He lifted Serene's hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. His eyes never left Evander's face. My wife is exceptional. I was not willing to risk losing her to slower suitors. The challenge in his words was unmistakable. Something cold flickered through Evander's expression before his charming mask slid back into place. Indeed. Well, you are a fortunate man, Mr. Vane. Miss Caldwell was quite the prize among eligible young ladies. Many men would have counted themselves lucky to win her regard. Mrs. Vane, Alaric corrected softly. And yes, I am exceptionally fortunate. Supper ended shortly after. The travelers dispersed to their rooms or settled around the fire with cards and conversation. Serene rose to leave, but Evander materialized at her elbow before she could take a step. A word, Mrs. Vane? In private? Alaric stiffened beside her. Whatever you wish to say, Serene replied. You may say, in front of my husband. I would prefer discretion. Evander's smile did not waver. It concerns a matter from before your marriage. Something I believe you would want to discuss away from prying ears. Her stomach dropped. Before she could respond, Alaric stepped forward, positioning himself between them. My wife has no secrets from me, Mr. Hale. If you have something to say it plainly. Very well. Evander's gaze fixed on Serene. I have a letter, written by your father 3 weeks ago, outlining the terms of a potential match between our families. A match you apparently accepted before this mysterious husband appeared. His smile sharpened. I'm curious how you intend to explain that. The blood drained from her face. There is nothing to explain, she managed. My circumstances changed. Changed rather dramatically, it would seem. One moment you were entertaining my courtship. The next, you were married to a textile merchant none of your family has ever mentioned. He stepped closer, voice dropping. I do not know what game you are playing, Miss Caldwell, but I intend to discover it. And when I do, I suspect your mysterious Mr. Vane will prove considerably less legitimate than he appears. Are you threatening my wife? Alaric's voice was ice. I am merely observing inconsistencies. Evander's eyes glittered. Your wife was quite amenable to my attentions not long ago. Her father practically promised her to me. And now she claims to have married someone else entirely? Forgive me if I find that difficult to believe. Believe what you like. Alaric stepped closer, and something dangerous radiated from him, the controlled menace of a predator deciding whether to strike. But if you approach my wife again, if you speak to her alone, if you so much as look at her, with anything less than complete respect, I will ensure you regret it for the rest of your considerably shortened social career." Evander went pale. "Is that a threat?" "It is a promise." Alaric's smile was sharp enough to cut. "I have extensive connections, Mr. Hale. Connections that would be very interested to learn about certain gambling debts you have been concealing from potential investors. Connections who might ask uncomfortable questions about the source of your family's recent loans." For one moment, Evander's charming facade cracked entirely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Then he smoothed his expression and stepped back. "This is not over," he said quietly. "Whatever arrangement you have trapped Miss Caldwell in, I will expose it. She deserves better than a man who must threaten his way through social situations. She deserves better than a fortune hunter who sees her as a solution to his financial problems." Alaric took Seren's arm. "Good evening, Mr. Hale." They left him standing in the common room and climbed the stairs in silence. Only when they were safely in their room did Seren find her voice. "You should not have done that." "Done what?" "Defended you." "Threatened him." She pulled away from his grip. "He will only become more suspicious now, more determined to expose us." "Let him try." Alaric's expression was granite. "I meant what I said. If he touches you, if he approaches you again, I will destroy him." "Why do you care?" The question burst out of her. "You have made it clear I mean nothing to you. An obligation. A burden. So why does it matter if Evander Hale exposes our fiction?" "Because it is not fiction." The words seemed to escape him against his will. He stopped, jaw tight, as though surprised by his own admission. "What?" "Protecting you." He turned away, hands fisting at his sides. "It has never been fiction. Not since you were 19 years old and smiled at me across your brother's parlor, and I realized I was in very serious trouble." Her heart stopped. "Alaric, do not." His voice cracked. "Please do not ask me to explain further. I have already said too much." She crossed to him, reckless, desperate, and needing to understand. Her hand found his shoulder, and he flinched as though her touch burned. "Look at me," she whispered. He did not move. "Alaric, look at me." Slowly, agonizingly, he turned. His eyes were raw, unguarded, and in them she saw everything he had been hiding. 7 years of longing disguised as indifference. 7 years of wanting her from across crowded rooms while pretending she did not exist. "Oh," she breathed. "Now you understand," he said quietly, "why we cannot speak of this again." But understanding had changed nothing. If anything, it had made everything infinitely worse. They stood frozen in the firelight, inches apart, the air between them charged with 7 years of unspoken truth. Serene's mind was spinning. Everything she had believed about Alaric Vane, every assumption she had made about his coldness, his indifference, his deliberate distance, all of it crumbled to dust in the face of what she had just seen in his eyes. He wanted her. He had always wanted her. "I do not understand," she whispered. "If you felt this way, why did you never say anything? Why did you spend 7 years treating me like I was invisible?" "Because you were invisible." His voice was hollow. "You had to be. Looking at you, really looking, was too dangerous. Acknowledging what I felt would have destroyed everything." "Destroyed what?" "My friendship with Hadrian, my duty to my family, the future my father spent his entire life building." He laughed bitterly. "I am the Duke of Thornmere, Seren. I cannot simply choose who I want. There are expectations, alliances, responsibilities that existed long before I was born and will continue long after I am gone. So you chose duty over feeling. I chose survival." His eyes met hers, bleak as winter. "What I feel for you is not manageable. It is not something I can control or contain or negotiate around. It consumes. And if I had let myself act on it, even once, I would have lost myself entirely. Her throat tightened. You speak as though caring for someone is a weakness. For men in my position, it is. He turned away, moving to the window, putting distance between them like armor. My father loved my mother desperately. When she died, it broke him. He spent 10 years grieving her instead of governing his estates, managing his responsibilities, being the duke he was born to be. By the time he recovered, the damage was done. Debts, neglected tenants, a legacy that took me years to repair. And you vowed never to let that happen to you. I vowed to be stronger, colder, to never let emotion compromise my judgment. His reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked haunted. I built walls specifically to keep everyone at a distance, and then you walked into your brother's parlor with ink on your fingers and fire in your eyes, and every wall I had ever built started cracking. Tears burned behind her eyes. You told me my laugh was too loud, she said softly. That first night, I thought you despised me. I was terrified of you. He turned to face her. You were everything I could not afford to want. Young, vibrant, alive in ways I had forgotten how to be. And every time you laughed, every time you challenged someone's opinion or said something unexpected or simply existed in my vicinity, I felt those cracks widening. So you pushed me away. I tried to make you hate me. I thought if you hated me, it would be easier. The distance would be mutual, and I could stop fighting myself every time we were in the same room. His mouth twisted. It did not work. No. She stepped closer. It did not. Serene. Her name was a warning on his lips. Don't come closer. Why not? Because if you come closer, I am going to do something we will both regret. What if I want you to? The words hung between them, dangerous as lightning. Alaric went very still. You do not know what you are saying. I know exactly what I am saying. She closed the distance between them until they were inches apart. I have spent 7 years wondering why you looked through me. 7 years convincing myself that my feelings were foolish, one-sided, destined for nothing but heartache. And now you tell me that all that time, you felt the same thing. It does not matter what I felt. It matters to me. Her hand found his chest, pressed flat against the rapid thunder of his heart. It matters because I have loved you since I was 19 years old, Alaric Vane. I have loved you through every cold glance and cutting comment and deliberate silence. And I am tired of pretending otherwise. Something shattered in his expression. Do not say that. His voice broke. Please do not say that unless you mean it. I mean it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I have never meant anything more in my life. For one endless moment, he stood motionless, every muscle rigid with restraint. She could see the war playing out across his features. Duty against desire. Fear against hope. Everything he had been taught against, everything he actually felt. Then he moved. His hands cupped her face, tilting her head back. His eyes searched hers one final time, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she did not want this as desperately as he did. He found none. Forgive me, he whispered. And then he kissed her. It was not gentle. 7 years of suppressed longing crashed through them both like a dam breaking. His mouth claimed hers with a desperation that matched her own, hungry and raw and utterly consuming. She gasped against him, fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. He tasted of wine and want, and something darker, something dangerous that made her pulse race and her thoughts scatter like leaves in a storm. His hands were in her hair, on her back, everywhere at once, as though he could not touch enough of her, could not get close enough no matter how hard he tried. She felt herself being consumed, felt the last of her defenses crumbling, felt 7 years of loneliness and longing being answered in a single, devastating moment. He groaned, low and broken, and the sound undid something in her chest. A sob caught in her throat, half laugh, half cry, because this was everything she had ever wanted and everything she had been afraid to hope for. Seren. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is madness. It is madness, she agreed breathlessly. Do not stop. He kissed her again, deeper this time, one hand sliding to the small of her back, pressing her against him until she could feel every line of his body through the fabric between them. She had dreamed of this, dreamed of him, and the reality was so much more devastating than any dream. We should not be doing this, he murmured against her mouth. No. There will be consequences. I know. Lady Philippa. He pulled back slightly, eyes anguished. I am promised to her. My father arranged it before he died. I cannot simply. Do you love her? No. The word was immediate, definite. I respect her. I appreciate her pragmatism. But I have never felt for her one fraction of what I feel standing here with you. Then choose me. The words escaped before she could stop them. Choose this. Choose us. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. She gripped his lapels, desperate. You said you built walls to keep everyone out. You said caring for someone was weakness. But what if it is strength? What if choosing love over duty is the bravest thing you could possibly do? He stared at her, and she watched the battle rage behind his eyes. Fear against hope, obligation against desire. Everything he had been raised to believe against everything his heart was screaming. If I choose you, he said quietly, I am choosing scandal, broken alliances, a future that looks nothing like what was planned. I know. My family will be furious. Society will talk. Your reputation will be questioned. I know. And you still want this? She kissed him, soft and certain. I want you, she whispered, whatever comes with that. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, something had shifted. The war was over. The decision had been made. Then God help us both, he said, because I cannot fight this anymore. He gathered her close, and they stood wrapped in each other, as rain hammered the window and the fire crackled low. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow would bring reality crashing back in. But tonight, they had this. Tonight, for the first time in 7 years, they were honest. And honesty, Seren discovered, was far more terrifying than any lie they had ever told. The fire had burned low when Seren finally stirred from Alaric's arms. They had moved to the small settee near the hearth at some point, tangled together in a way that would have scandalized every matron in London. His coat had been discarded. Her hair had come completely undone. And for the past hour, they had simply held each other, speaking in fragments, filling in the gaps of 7 years. I need to tell you something, Alaric said quietly. His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. About Evander Hale. She stiffened slightly. What about him? He is more dangerous than you realize. Alaric's voice darkened. The debts I mentioned are only part of it. There have been rumors. Women he has courted who later refused to speak of him. A scandal at Cambridge that was quietly buried. Nothing proven, but enough to suggest a pattern. A pattern of what? Manipulation. Coercion. His arms tightened around her. He does not accept rejection gracefully. Seren. And he clearly believed you were his for the taking. A chill ran through her, despite the fire's warmth. My father would never have agreed to a match if he knew. Your father likely doesn't know. Hale is skilled at presenting exactly what people wish to see. It is only those who look beneath the surface who recognize what he truly is. And you looked beneath the surface. I made inquiries the moment he started circling you. Alaric's jaw tightened. 2 seasons ago, when he first began appearing at events where you were present. She pulled back to stare at him. 2 seasons ago? You were watching him that long? I was watching you. The admission came out rough, almost pained. And by extension, anyone who showed interest in you. Hale's attention raised concerns. I had a man look into his background. You investigated my potential suitors. I protected you. His eyes met hers, unapologetic. Even when I had no right to. Even when you would have been furious if you knew. She should have been furious now. Should have been outraged at his presumption, his interference, his arrogance in thinking he had any say in her romantic prospects. Instead, she felt something warm bloom in her chest. You impossible man, she whispered. I am aware. You spent 7 years pretending I did not exist, while secretly vetting every man who looked at me twice. It seemed the least harmful approach. His mouth quirked slightly. I could not have you, but I could ensure that whoever did have you was worthy. And Evander Hale was not worthy. Evander Hale was not fit to breathe the same air as you. The vehemence in his voice startled her. But I could not simply tell you that. You would have demanded explanations I was not prepared to give. So I watched, and waited, and hoped you would see through his charm before it was too late. I might have married him. The realization hit her like cold water. If this storm had not happened, if we had not been trapped together, I might have accepted his suit. You would not have. Alaric's certainty was absolute. You are too intelligent, too perceptive. Eventually, you would have sensed something wrong. You have more faith in me than I have in myself. I have always had faith in you. He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Since the moment you argued with Lord Pemberton about agricultural reform at your brother's dinner party, I knew you were remarkable. You told me my opinions were charming but misguided. I lied. His smile was rueful. You were devastatingly correct, and I was terrified that if I admitted it, I would spend the entire evening staring at you like a besotted fool. Tears pricked her eyes. We have wasted so much time. Yes. 7 years of pretending. Yes. And now we have one night in a storm before reality returns. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. What if we had more than one night? Her heart stumbled. What do you mean? I mean that when this storm breaks, when we return to the world, I do not want to pretend anymore. He sat up, taking her hands in his. I want to end my arrangement with Lady Philippa. I want to court you properly. I want to tell your brother that I am hopelessly, irrevocably in love with his sister and have been for the better part of a decade. Alaric, I know it will not be simple. There will be scandal. Lady Philippa's family will be furious. Society will gossip. But I am tired of living a life designed by someone else. His eyes burned into hers. I want to choose. For once in my life, I want to choose what I actually want instead of what is expected. And you want me. I have always wanted you. He lifted her hands to his lips. I was simply too afraid to admit it. She stared at him, heart pounding, mind racing. Everything she had ever hoped for was being offered to her on a silver platter. All she had to do was reach out and take it. Yes, she breathed. Yes. Yes to all of it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Court me properly. Tell my brother. Scandalize society. I do not care about any of it as long as I have you. He kissed her then, fierce and tender all at once. She tasted salt on his lips and realized he was crying too. "Tomorrow," he murmured against her mouth. "Tomorrow, we begin everything." "And tonight?" He pulled back to look at her, and in his eyes, she saw a question he would not put into words, a line they had not yet crossed, a choice that would change everything irrevocably. She answered by kissing him again. And this time, neither of them pulled away. The candles had guttered to nothing by the time they came apart. Seren lay in the narrow bed, wrapped in Alaric's arms, her cheek pressed to his bare chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, a rhythm she wanted to memorize. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a soft orange glow across the room. Outside, rain still drummed against the window, but softer now, the fury of the storm finally beginning to fade. She had never felt so content, so complete, as though a piece of herself that had been missing for 7 years had finally slotted into place. His skin was warm against hers. His fingers traced absent patterns on her shoulder, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be truly, wholly loved. "I should feel guilty," she murmured. His fingers traced lazy patterns down her spine. "Do you?" "No." She tilted her head to look at him. "I feel like I have finally stopped holding my breath after 7 years." "I know the sensation." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "When we return to London, I will speak with Lady Philippa first. She deserves honesty. Then I will call on your brother. Hadrian will be furious. Hadrian will be protective. There is a difference." His mouth quirked. "He may threaten to shoot me, but ultimately he wants you happy. Once he sees that I am the cause of that happiness, he will come around. You are very confident. I am very determined." He rolled them so he was propped above her, looking down into her face. "I have spent 7 years denying myself this. Do you truly think anything could stop me now?" She reached up to trace the line of his jaw. "What about your responsibilities? The alliances your father built? Everything you said about duty and legacy? Those things still matter." His expression sobered. "I will not pretend otherwise. There will be consequences for breaking the arrangement with the Ashworths. My family's position in certain circles will be diminished. Some doors will close. And that does not frighten you? It terrifies me." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her fingertips. "But losing you frightens me more. I spent 7 years being a coward, Seren. 7 years hiding behind duty because it was safer than admitting what I felt. I will not waste another 7. She pulled him down and kissed him, slow and deep. He sighed against her mouth, sinking into her embrace like a man finally coming home. "We should sleep," he murmured eventually. "Tomorrow will be difficult." "In a moment." She nestled closer, unwilling to let go of this fragile, perfect peace. "I want to remember this, how it feels to lie here with you, how it feels to be chosen. You will always be chosen." His arms tightened around her. "Every day for the rest of my life, I will choose you. Even when I argue with you about agricultural reform, especially then." He smiled into her hair. "Your passion for crop rotation is devastatingly attractive." She laughed, and the sound felt foreign after so many days of tension. Light, free, happy. "I love you," she said softly. "I know I said it before, but I wanted to say it again. While we are here, while it is just us, I love you too." He kissed her temple. "More than I have ever loved anything. More than I knew I was capable of loving." They lay in silence after that, wrapped around each other as the storm finally began to ease. Seren felt sleep tugging at her edges, warm and heavy, promising dreams that for once might be sweeter than reality. She was almost under when she heard it. A sound in the hallway. Footsteps stopping outside their door. The creak of floorboards as someone shifted their weight. Alaric went rigid beneath her. "What is it?" she whispered. "Someone is outside." His voice was barely audible. "Do not move." They lay frozen, listening. The footsteps retreated after a long moment, fading down the hallway and descending the stairs. But the peace of the room had shattered. "Evander," Seren breathed. "Perhaps." Alaric's jaw was tight. Or simply another guest returning to their room. At this hour? He did not answer. They both knew what it meant if Evander had been lurking outside their door, what he might have heard, what conclusions he might draw. "We need to leave early tomorrow," Alaric said finally, "before anyone else wakes, before Hale has a chance to confront us again. Will the roads be passable?" "They will have to be." He sat up, reaching for his shirt. "I will speak with the coachman at first light. We leave as soon as the horses can be readied." She watched him dress in the dim light, her heart aching at the distance that had suddenly opened between them. Minutes ago they had been wrapped in each other, warm and safe and certain. Now reality was seeping back in like cold water through cracks. "Alaric." He paused, shirt half buttoned. "Yes?" "Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Evander says or does, I do not regret tonight." She sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. "I need you to know that." He crossed to her in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "Nothing is going to happen. We will leave this inn. We will return to London. And we will begin our life together properly." "You sound so certain." "I am certain." He kissed her forehead. "I have wasted 7 years on uncertainty. I refuse to waste another moment." She wanted to believe him, wanted to let his confidence wash away her fears. But something dark was curling in her stomach, a premonition she could not shake. The storm was ending, and whatever came next would be far more dangerous than any weather. Morning came too quickly. Seren woke to pale light filtering through the window and an empty bed. The sheets beside her were cold. Alaric had been gone for some time. She sat up, heart already racing, and found a note on the pillow. "Gone to arrange the carriage. Dress quickly. We must leave before others wake." The words were terse, practical, nothing like the tender declarations of the night before. She told herself it meant nothing. He was simply being cautious, protecting them both from scandal. But as she dressed in her wrinkled traveling clothes and pinned up her disheveled hair, she could not shake the feeling that something had shifted. The warmth of the night had evaporated, leaving behind something brittle and uncertain. When she descended to the common room, Alaric was waiting by the door. His expression was carefully neutral, his posture rigid. He looked like the Duke of Thornmere again, not the man who had whispered her name against her skin. "The carriage is ready," he said. "The roads are passable, though barely." "Good." She searched his face for some sign of the intimacy they had shared. "Alaric, is something wrong?" "We need to discuss something." His voice was low, urgent. "Not here, in the carriage." They exited the inn into weak morning sunlight. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and dripping. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. It should have felt hopeful. Instead, dread coiled tighter in Seren's stomach. Alaric helped her into the carriage without meeting her eyes. Once inside, he sat across from her rather than beside her. The distance felt deliberate, pointed. "What has happened?" she demanded. He was silent for a long moment as the carriage began to move, wheels squelching through mud. "Hale approached me this morning," he said finally, "while you were still sleeping." Her blood went cold. "What did he say?" "He knows, Seren, or suspects enough to be dangerous." Alaric's jaw tightened. "He heard something last night. I do not know how much, but he made implications that suggested he understood the nature of our arrangement. Then we deny it. We maintain the fiction. The fiction is collapsing. His eyes met hers, and she saw anguish there. He is already composing a letter to your father. He intends to expose us both unless— Unless what? Alaric looked away. Unless you agree to break this engagement and consider his suit instead. The words hit her like a physical blow. He is blackmailing me. He is blackmailing us both. Alaric's hands clenched into fists. If this becomes public, your reputation is destroyed. You would be unmarriageable. Your family would be humiliated. And you? My situation is equally precarious. His voice was hollow. A duke who breaks an arrangement with one woman only to be caught in scandal with another? The Ashworths would ensure I was ruined socially. Every door in London would close. She stared at him, seeing the calculation behind his eyes. The same calculation she had seen 1,000 times before. The Duke of Thornmere weighing costs against benefits. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I am saying." He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I'm saying that perhaps we were hasty. Perhaps we let the storm and the circumstance cloud our judgment." The words landed like knife blows. "Hasty," she repeated. "You told me you loved me." "I do love you." "Then how can you?" "Because loving you is not enough." His voice cracked. "Not if that love destroys us both. Not if it costs you everything you have ever known. I do not care about my reputation. You should care." His eyes were bleak. "In this world, reputation is everything. Without it, you have nothing. No prospects, no security, no future. I would have you. You would have a ruined man and a life of exile." He shook his head. "I cannot do that to you, Seren. I cannot let you sacrifice everything for something as fragile as love." She could not breathe, could not think. "So, what are you suggesting?" she asked, voice shaking. "That we pretend last night never happened? That we return to our separate lives and forget?" "I am suggesting we be realistic." His expression had shuddered completely. "What we shared was beautiful, but it was also impossible. And impossible things cannot survive contact with reality." Tears burned down her cheeks. "You are a coward," she said quietly. He flinched as though she had struck him. "Perhaps I am." His voice was barely audible. "But I would rather be a coward than the man who destroyed you." They rode the rest of the way in silence. The carriage wheels churned through mud, the horses' hooves splashing through puddles left by the storm. Sunlight streamed through the windows, incongruously cheerful, mocking her misery with its brightness. Birds sang in the hedgerows. The world was waking up, fresh and clean and new, and Seren sat in the corner of the carriage, as far from Alaric as the small space would allow, feeling her heart crack apart, piece by piece. She had given him everything, her trust, her body, her heart, and he had looked at her across this carriage and told her it was all a mistake. That love was not enough, that she should be realistic about impossible things. She stared out the window at the rain-washed countryside and felt something vital crack and crumble in her chest. Every mile that passed took her further from the inn, further from the woman she had been in his arms, further from the future she had foolishly allowed herself to imagine. He had chosen fear, after all, and she had been a fool to expect anything different. 3 days passed in a blur of misery. Seren had returned to her family's estate, numb and hollow. She went through the motions of daily life, like a ghost, haunting her own existence. She ate meals she did not taste. She answered questions she barely heard. She lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment at the inn until the memories felt worn thin from overuse. Hadrian had asked questions she could not answer. He had looked at her with those knowing eyes, the same eyes that had watched her grow from child to woman, and she had seen the concern lurking there. But what could she tell him? That she had fallen in love with his best friend? That she had given herself to him completely? That he had shattered her heart and walked away? Her mother had fussed over her wrinkled clothes and exhausted face, pressing cups of tea into her hands and suggesting she rest. Her father had watched her with knowing eyes that saw far too much, though he said nothing. He simply sat with her in the library some evenings, reading in companionable silence, offering a presence that asked nothing and gave everything. She told them the storm had delayed her, that the Duke of Thornmere had escorted her safely home, that nothing else had happened. The lies tasted like ash. On the fourth day, a letter arrived. It was addressed to her father, but Hadrian brought it to her study, his expression grim. "You should read this," he said. She unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and utterly unfamiliar, but the signature made her stomach drop. Evander Hale. "Dear Mr. Caldwell, it is with great reluctance that I write to you regarding your daughter. During my recent sojourn at the Gilded Fern, I had occasion to observe Miss Caldwell in circumstances that gave me considerable concern. She was traveling with a man she claimed was her husband, yet the nature of their arrangement seemed far from marital. I have reason to believe she was trapped in a compromising situation, perhaps coerced by a man of superior rank who took advantage of the storm and her isolation. As your neighbor and longtime friend of your family, I felt it my duty to inform you of these observations. I would be honored to call upon you to discuss the matter further, and to offer any assistance in protecting your daughter's reputation. I remain, as always, your devoted servant." Serene's hands shook so violently the paper rattled. "This is blackmail," Hadrian said quietly. "Subtle, but unmistakable. He is trying to force my hand." She looked up at her brother. "If I do not accept his suit, he will destroy me." "He will try." Hadrian's expression hardened. "He will not succeed." "How can you be so certain?" Before he could answer, a commotion erupted in the entrance hall. Raised voices, the butler's protest. Then footsteps, heavy and determined, striding toward the study. The door burst open. Alaric stood on the threshold, disheveled and wild-eyed, looking nothing like the composed duke she had always known. His cravat was askew, his hair was windswept, and his expression held something she had never seen before: desperation. "Where is Hale?" he demanded. Hadrian stepped forward, blocking Serene from view. "What are you doing here, Merrick?" "I received word that Hale is coming here today, that he intends to press his suit directly." Alaric's gaze found Serene over Hadrian's shoulder. "I cannot let that happen." "You made your position clear," she said coldly. "We are to be realistic. We are to accept that impossible things cannot survive reality." "I was wrong." The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep. "I was a coward and a fool, and I have spent 3 days trying to convince myself that letting you go was the honorable choice. But it is not honorable. It is fear disguised as nobility." Hadrian looked between them, eyes narrowing. "Someone needs to explain what exactly happened at that inn. I love your sister." Alaric did not look away from Serene. "I have loved her for 7 years. I was too afraid to admit it, too consumed by duty and obligation to act on it. And when we were finally forced to confront the truth, I let fear drive me away." "You broke her heart," Hadrian said quietly. "Yes." Alaric's voice cracked. "And I have come to beg her forgiveness, to tell her that I choose her. Not duty, not reputation, not the life my father planned. Her." Serene could not breathe. "You said love was not enough. I was wrong." He stepped past Hadrian, crossing to her. Love is the only thing that matters. Everything else, the scandal, the broken alliances, the gossip, it means nothing if I lose you. And Lady Philippa? I ended the arrangement yesterday. His eyes burned into hers. I told her the truth, that I could not marry her when my heart belonged to someone else. Her family is furious. My reputation is in tatters. Half of London thinks I have lost my mind. He took her hands, gripping them fiercely. And I do not care. Not about any of it. Because the only thing that matters is standing here, telling you that I love you, and praying you will give me another chance. Tears streamed down her face. You hurt me. I know. You made me believe I was not worth fighting for. You are worth everything. His voice broke. You are worth more than duty, more than legacy, more than every expectation that has ever been placed upon me. And if you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Hadrian cleared his throat. This is all very dramatic, but we still have the problem of Evander Hale. Hale is being dealt with. Alaric straightened, something dangerous entering his expression. I have spent the last 3 days compiling evidence of his debts, his manipulations, and his treatment of women. I intend to confront him publicly and ensure he never threatens another person again. Publicly? Serene's eyes widened. He wanted scandal. Alaric's smile was sharp as a blade. I will give him scandal. Evander Hale arrived at Caldwell House that afternoon with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. He was wrong. Serene watched from the window of her father's study as his carriage pulled up the drive. Beside her, Alaric stood with coiled tension, a predator waiting to strike. Hadrian had positioned himself near the door, arms crossed, expression murderous. "Let me handle this," Alaric said quietly. "We handle this together." Serene met his eyes. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Something softened in his expression. "Together, then." The butler announced Evander with obvious reluctance. He entered the study with a charming smile already in place, only to freeze when he saw Alaric. "Your Grace." His smile faltered. "I did not expect to find you here." "I imagine you did not." Alaric stepped forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You expected to find Miss Caldwell alone and vulnerable. You expected to leverage your threats into a forced engagement. You expected no consequences for your manipulation." Evander's expression hardened. "I am not sure what you are implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Alaric produced a sheaf of papers from his coat. "I have here documentation of your family's debts, totaling over £40,000. I have statements from 3 women you courted under false pretenses, each of whom withdrew from society shortly after ending their association with you. I have correspondence proving you deliberately targeted heiresses whose families were desperate enough to overlook your reputation." The color drained from Evander's face. "Those documents prove nothing." "They prove a pattern." Alaric's voice was ice. "A pattern of predation, manipulation, and coercion. And I intend to share them with every influential family in London, unless you withdraw your suit immediately and permanently." "You are bluffing." "I never bluff." Alaric stepped closer. "You threatened to destroy Miss Caldwell's reputation. You thought you could use scandal as a weapon. But you forgot one crucial detail." "What detail?" "I am the Duke of Thornmere." His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "My family has survived 3 centuries of scandal. We have weathered wars, plagues, and political upheaval. Do you truly believe your pathetic threats frighten me?" Evander's composure cracked entirely. "She was promised to me," he spat. "Her father practically guaranteed it." "My father guaranteed nothing." Serene stepped forward, voice steady despite her racing heart. He discussed possibilities. He considered options. But the final choice was always mine. And you choose him? Evander laughed bitterly. A man who has spent 7 years ignoring you. A man who courts one woman while bedding another? I choose a man who loves me. She lifted her chin. A man who fought his own fears to stand here today. A man who is willing to sacrifice reputation, alliances, everything he was raised to value, simply because he wants me. How touching. Evander's lip curled. And when the scandal breaks? When all of London knows you spent 2 nights alone with him at that inn? Then all of London will know I spent 2 nights with my future husband. Alaric took Seren's hand, interlacing their fingers. We were stranded by the storm. We fell in love. We intend to marry as soon as possible. There is no scandal in that. You expect people to believe that convenient fiction? I expect people to believe what I tell them. Alaric's eyes were cold. And I will be telling them that you, Mr. Hale, attempted to blackmail a lady of good standing into marriage. I will be telling them about your debts, your manipulations, and your pattern of preying on vulnerable women. By the time I am finished, there will not be a single door in London that opens to you. Silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Then Evander's shoulders slumped. You have made a powerful enemy today, Your Grace. I have defeated a pathetic coward. Alaric's voice was flat. Leave this house. Leave London. And if I ever hear that you have approached Miss Caldwell again, I will ensure you spend the rest of your life regretting it. Evander cast one last venomous look at Seren. Then he turned and strode from the room without another word. The door slammed behind him. The sound echoed through the study like a gunshot, final and irrevocable. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The silence was absolute. Serene's knees buckled. Alaric caught her before she could fall, gathering her close against his chest. It is over, he murmured into her hair. He cannot hurt you now. You destroyed him. He destroyed himself. Alaric pulled back to look at her face. I simply ensured the world knew the truth. Hadrian cleared his throat from across the room. That was extremely satisfying to watch, he admitted, but we still have the matter of explaining this to our parents. I will speak with Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell immediately. Alaric straightened, though he did not release Serene's hand. I wish to formally request permission to court your sister with the intention of marriage. Hadrian studied them both for a long moment. You truly love her. More than my own life. And you are willing to face the consequences, the scandal, the broken alliances, the disapproval of everyone who expected you to marry Lady Philippa. I would face anything for her. Alaric's grip tightened on Seren's hand. I have already proven that today. Hadrian nodded slowly. Then you have my blessing. He smiled slightly. Though I reserve the right to threaten your life if you ever hurt her again. That is entirely fair. Seren laughed through her tears. You are both impossible, she managed. And yet you love us anyway. Hadrian crossed the room to embrace her briefly. Go. Talk to Father. I suspect he already knows more than he has let on. They found her parents in the drawing room. Her father listened to Alaric's formal request with an expression of grave consideration that gradually softened into something like approval. Her mother wept with happiness. By the time the sun set, everything had changed. Seren was officially being courted by the Duke of Thornmere. The announcement would go out by the end of the week, and the life she had never dared to dream of was finally, impossibly, within reach. The scandal, when it erupted, was everything they had anticipated, and more. London's gossip mills churned with speculation. The Duke of Thornmere had broken his arrangement with Lady Philippa Ashworth for the daughter of a shipping merchant. They had been trapped together at an inn during a storm. There had been a confrontation with another suitor. Allegations of impropriety swirled like autumn leaves. Through it all, Alaric stood firm. He escorted Seren to every event, his hand warm at the small of her back, his gaze daring anyone to speak against her. He called on her daily during proper hours, never missing an opportunity to demonstrate his devotion publicly. He made it abundantly clear that anyone who questioned her virtue would answer to him personally. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to turn. Because Alaric Vane was respected, powerful, the heir to 3 centuries of influence. And when he treated Seren Caldwell with such obvious adoration, society had little choice but to follow. Lady Philippa, to everyone's surprise, proved gracious in defeat. She had never loved Alaric, she told her friends. Their arrangement had been purely practical. She wished him happiness with his new bride. The Ashworth family was less forgiving. But even their resentment faded eventually, smoothed over by strategic concessions and the passage of time. 3 months after that day in the study, Alaric proposed. He did it properly this time. On one knee in her mother's garden, a ring that had belonged to his grandmother glinting in the afternoon light. He asked for her hand in marriage, and she said yes before he had finished the question. The wedding was small, but perfect. Immediate family only, in the chapel at Thornmere. Hadrian stood as witness. Lady Philippa sent flowers. And when Alaric kissed his bride, Seren felt something settle into place in her chest. A rightness that went beyond happiness. A certainty that this moment, this man, this life, was exactly where she was meant to be. 2 years later, she stood in the entrance hall of Thornmere, watching snow drift gently past the windows. It was nearly Christmas, and the house was warm with firelight and evergreen garlands, and the sound of their daughter's laughter from the nursery above. She still marveled at how much had changed. The drafty old manor had become a home under her care, filled with warmth and color and life. The staff adored her, the tenants respected her, and every morning she woke beside a man who looked at her as though she were the most precious thing in his world. Their daughter, Helena, had Alaric's gray eyes and Serene's copper hair, a perfect blend of both parents that made her heart ache with love every time she looked at her. She was nearly 2 now, toddling through the halls with increasing confidence, filling the ancient rooms with laughter that had been absent for far too long. Remembering something, Alaric's voice came from behind her, warm with amusement. She turned, smiling. The storm, the inn, the room, the bed. He moved to wrap his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. I believe you told me I would be sleeping on the floor. And you told me you were simply not interested in me. She laughed. We were both terrible liars. We were both terrified. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But we figured it out eventually. Eventually. She turned in his arms to face him. After 7 years of denial, 2 days of crisis, and 1 very satisfying confrontation with a villain. I still treasure the look on Hale's face. Alaric smiled, though I treasure this more. This, you, here, in my arms, in my home, in my life. He kissed her softly. Every morning I wake beside you feels like a gift I do not deserve. You absolutely deserve it. She traced the line of his jaw. You fought for it. You chose it. You proved that love matters more than duty or reputation or fear. I chose you, he corrected quietly. Everything else followed from that. From upstairs, their daughter's laughter rang out again, joined by Hadrian's voice and their mother's delighted response. The house was full of family, full of love, full of everything Seren had once believed impossible. Do you remember what you said to me that first night at the inn? She asked. I said several things, most of them regrettable. You said we would return to our separate lives and pretend none of it ever happened. As I mentioned, his mouth quirked. Terrible liar. She pulled him down for a kiss, slow and sweet, and full of everything they had built together. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you too. He held her closer. More than I knew was possible. More than I will ever be able to express. Then show me. She took his hand, interlacing their fingers as she had done 1,000 times before. Every day for the rest of our lives. Show me. Always, he promised, until my last breath and beyond. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. This was home. Not the walls around them, not the title or the estate, or any of the trappings of his position. This, him. The two of them together, choosing each other every day. Outside, snow continued to fall, soft and silent and beautiful. Inside, warmth and love and laughter filled every corner of their home. They had weathered the storm together. And on the other side, they had found something worth more than any alliance, any reputation, and any expectation that had ever been placed upon them. They had found each other, and that, Seren knew with absolute certainty, was the only happy ending that had ever truly mattered, the only ending worth fighting for, the only ending that made every storm, every tear, every moment of doubt worthwhile.